They're the kind of silence that doesn't come from a lack of sound. It comes from presence, when someone's right there in front of you, but it feels like they're miles away. That's what it felt like walking into Lisa's parents' house that evening. We were barely 10 steps in, and I already knew something was wrong. She didn't reach for my hand like she usually did when we came in together. No whispered inside jokes. No smile. Her fingers were curled tight around her phone, thumbs moving like she was disarming a bomb. I said hello to her parents. She didn't say anything, just nodded slightly and kept texting. It wasn't the first time we'd had dinner at her parents' place. Not even the 100th. They lived in one of those quiet, tree-lined suburbs north of Atlanta. Her mom still made Sunday dinners like it was the 90s, the kind of meals with multiple side dishes and a dessert that just happened to be ready. Normally, Lisa loved these nights. She'd help her mom in the kitchen, pour wine for her aunt, laugh a little too loudly at her uncle's dry jokes. But not tonight. Tonight, she didn't even pretend. I stood awkwardly in the entryway while Lisa breezed past everyone and dropped onto the couch like she was visiting out of obligation. I followed her, trying to ignore the knot forming in my stomach. Her cousin Jared was already planted on the love seat across from us, talking about some streaming series I'd never heard of. I sat beside Lisa and rested my hand on her knee. She shifted, not dramatically, not enough for anyone else to notice. But I noticed that subtle lean away, the tension in her thigh under my hand. It was enough to send a shiver of realization through me. She didn't want to be touched. By me. I slowly pulled my hand back and tried to play it cool. Jared launched into some half-baked monologue about real estate or Bitcoin or whatever he was into that week. Lisa nodded occasionally, her eyes never leaving her phone screen. I sat there like a ghost in my own life. Jason, her dad said, strolling over with 2 beers, how's work going these days? Still doing the tech thing? Yeah, I said, taking the beer, grateful for the distraction. Wrapped up a long project this week. Kind of big one. I'm hoping it'll open a few doors. Lisa snorted. Literally snorted. Her head still bent over her phone. I blinked, unsure if I heard her right. I turned to her. What's that supposed to mean? She looked up for the first time all night and blinked like she'd forgotten I was even there. Nothing. Just you said the same thing last year. About that VR thing? That went nowhere. She said it like it was just some offhand comment, but it hit me like a sucker punch. Her dad chuckled nervously and sipped his beer. Jared raised his eyebrows and looked at me like, yikes. Lisa was already back on her phone. I laughed it off because what else was I supposed to do? But I felt the heat rising in my face. This wasn't just Lisa being snippy. This was something deeper, something mean. The weirdest part? Nobody said a thing. Nobody pulled her aside or called her out for being disrespectful. It was like they all silently agreed I was fair game. We were called to the table a few minutes later. Lisa got up and moved toward the dining room without even glancing back. I followed, my appetite already gone. The table was set like it always was, cloth napkins, 3 forks, wine glasses already poured. Her mom went all out for family dinners, and for years I'd admired that about her. Her consistency, the way she held the family together with food and hospitality. But tonight, even that felt hollow. Like set dressing in a play where I didn't belong anymore. Lisa didn't sit next to me. She slid into the seat across from me instead, between Jared and her sister Nicole. When I looked at her, she was mid-laugh at something Jared had said. She caught my eye briefly, and, just like that, the smile dropped from her face. She looked down at her plate. I hadn't done anything wrong. At least, not that I could think of. And yet, I felt like I was being punished. We all passed dishes around, made polite small talk. Her uncle joked about George's chances this football season. Her mom asked me about my mom's hip surgery. Lisa said nothing to me, not a word. But she laughed. Loudly. Too loudly. Especially when Jared made some crack about being between gigs and working on a startup. Lisa leaned in toward him, touched his arm as she laughed. That used to be me she laughed with. Me she touched like that. The disconnect hit me harder than I expected. We weren't just drifting apart. We were already on opposite shores, and I hadn't even realized it until now. I sat there, chewing my food and pretending everything was fine, while the woman I'd loved for nearly 15 years acted like I was just some guy who tagged along for dinner. And the worst part? She wasn't even trying to hide it. Dinner started the way these things always did. A round of small talk, a few half-hearted toasts, and the clinking of cutlery as everyone dove into Lisa's mom's famous lemon chicken and roasted vegetables. But even as the conversation floated around the table, politics kept politely off limits, of course. I felt like I was watching everything from behind a pane of glass. I tried to play the part, smile when appropriate, nod along when someone brought up a news show or the absurd price of eggs. I even forced a laugh when Lisa's aunt mentioned how quiet I'd been lately. What I didn't say, what I couldn't say, was that I'd been quiet because I felt like a stranger in my own marriage. Lisa was the star of the table that night. She bounced between conversations with the kind of charisma I used to admire. She asked her mom about her book club, laughed with her sister about some influencer's TikTok meltdown, and even joked with her dad about his outdated phone. But whenever I spoke, she barely reacted. It started subtle. I was telling her cousin Drew about a client pitch we had landed, something I was genuinely proud of, when Lisa cut in. "Is that the one with the big idea you've been working on for, what, like a year?" she said, her voice light but unmistakably sharp. "You finally finished it?" I blinked, caught off guard. "Yeah, we did. It actually went really well." "Oh, wow," she said, raising her eyebrows. "You're really stretching those deadlines, huh?" A couple of people chuckled, soft, awkward sounds, but most just looked down at their plates. Drew smiled nervously and cleared his throat. I felt the sting of embarrassment rush to my face. I forced a laugh. "Yeah, well, innovation takes time." She gave a tight-lipped smile and sipped her wine, already tuning out again. I tried to shrug it off, but my appetite was gone. The food might as well have been cardboard. I chewed mechanically while the noise of conversation carried on around me. A few minutes later, her mom asked me if I'd had a chance to fix the garbage disposal at our place yet. I smiled, ready to answer, but Lisa jumped in before I could. "Oh my God, Mom, you should have seen it," she said, chuckling. "He spent 2 hours trying to fix it, then ended up making it worse. We had water spraying everywhere. I had to call a plumber the next morning." There was again that tone, that smile, like she was telling a funny story to make the room laugh, except the punchline was me. Everyone joined in with light chuckles. Her mom, her sister, even her dad. Nobody meant it maliciously, I think, but that didn't make it hurt any less. I sat there, the butt of the joke, pretending to laugh along while something cracked quietly inside me. I didn't say anything, just kept chewing, kept nodding, kept swallowing it down. Lisa reached for the wine bottle, poured herself another glass, and went right back to chatting with Nicole about their childhood neighborhood. It was like I wasn't even there, like I was part of the furniture. After the second glass, she got bolder. Jared was going on about his app, some nonsense about disrupting car rentals, or whatever, and I tried to change the subject. "I don't know, man," I said. "Maybe I'm too old school, but I think some tech is just noise. Solutions looking for a problem." Lisa snorted again. Says the guy who spent 3 months coding a meditation timer app. The table laughed harder this time. I stared at her. She didn't even look back at me. That app had been a side project, something I worked on in my spare time to challenge myself. She knew how much it meant to me, and now she was dragging it out in front of her family like it was some joke. I felt heat rise up my neck, but I stayed quiet. I didn't want to cause a scene, but inside something was shifting, cracking. This wasn't teasing. This wasn't playful banter. This was public disdain. She wasn't just poking fun. She was undermining me. And no one, not her family, not even the people I'd known for over a decade, stood up or stepped in. They all just laughed. After a while, people started talking over each other again. The conversation drifted back to vacations and home renovations. Lisa leaned into Jared's ear and whispered something that made him smirk. I looked down at my plate, barely touched, and pushed the food around with my fork. I suddenly felt so small, like I was disappearing in real time. A part of me wanted to call her out, to ask her what the hell was going on. But I knew how that would play out. She'd deflect, laugh it off, make me seem dramatic or oversensitive. And somehow, I'd come off looking like the villain for ruining dinner. So I swallowed it, like I always did. Lisa turned to me once more near the end of dinner, smiling wide with wine-slicked teeth. "You know what's funny?" she said, loud enough for the whole table. "Jason used to be so ambitious. He wanted to start a business, write a book, maybe even run his own team someday. Now he's just happy keeping his head down. My stomach dropped. No one laughed this time. Not even Jared. Her dad shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Her mom cleared her throat. Lisa didn't even seem to realize she'd crossed a line. She just raised her glass, took another sip, and looked past me like I wasn't even there. I wish I could tell you I said something, that I stood up, banged my fist on the table, and called her out for what she was doing. But the truth is, I didn't. I sat there in silence, staring at the last piece of chicken on my plate, hearing my own heartbeat echo louder than any voice in the room. Lisa's words hung there, sharp, cold, deliberate, and the silence that followed was worse than the comment itself. Her dad cleared his throat. Her mom let out a small, nervous laugh like she was trying to reset the mood, but nobody bit. The air was heavy, like everyone knew what had just happened, but no one wanted to be the one to name it. I felt like I was shrinking. I had been humiliated before. At work and school, sure, but never like this. Never by the one person who was supposed to have my back no matter what. Lisa hadn't just embarrassed me. She had done it intentionally, in front of her family, and didn't seem the least bit bothered by it. And what's done even more, no one said anything to defend me. I looked around the table, hoping to lock eyes with someone, anyone who might be on my side. Her dad looked away and reached for the wine. Her mom fiddled with her napkin. Jared seemed suddenly interested in the salt shaker. Even Nicole, who I thought liked me, pretended she needed something from the kitchen. Nobody wanted to get involved. Nobody wanted to say, "Hey, that's enough, Lisa." So I sat there, my jaw clenched, my appetite gone, while Lisa poured herself a third glass of wine like she hadn't just gutted me in front of a dozen people. She leaned back in her chair, swirling the wine in her glass with one hand and her phone in the other. She didn't look at me. She didn't apologize. She just kept talking to her cousin like I wasn't even sitting 3 feet away from her. And that's when it really hit me. This wasn't just some awkward slip-up. This wasn't a bad night or a poorly timed joke. This was intentional. This was the culmination of months, maybe years, of growing contempt, finally finding its way to the surface in the most public way possible. And I just let it happen. Lisa had always had a sharp tongue. I used to admire that about her. She could hold her own in any room. She was quick, witty, fearless. But somewhere along the way, that sharpness turned inward, pointed not at the world but at me. And I didn't notice, or maybe I didn't want to. I made excuses, told myself she was stressed, that we were going through a rough patch. But that night, at that table, with her wine and her smirking cousin and her family too spineless to say anything, I finally saw it. She didn't respect me, and the people around her, they didn't either. At some point, her aunt asked Lisa about work, and her whole face lit up. She talked about a new campaign she was leading, how her boss trusted her with more responsibility, how she'd been invited to some conference in Chicago next month. Everyone oohed and ahhed and congratulated her, and I joined in like the good husband I was supposed to be. "That's amazing," I said, forcing a smile. "You've really been on a roll lately." Lisa looked at me like she was surprised I spoke. "Yeah," she said, turning back to her aunt. "I've had to take on a lot more lately, especially since someone has the luxury of working from home and calling it busy." It took me a second to realize she was talking about me. A few of them laughed again. Her uncle even let out a low whistle. I looked at her, stunned. "What's that supposed to mean?" Lisa raised an eyebrow, her face the picture of casual cruelty. "Nothing. Just that not all of us have the kind of job where you can spend most of the day in sweatpants." I opened my mouth, then closed it again. My throat felt tight. My chest hurt. I wanted to defend myself, to remind her and everyone at the table that I was the one who paid half the mortgage, who stayed up late chasing clients in other time zones, who supported her when she was between jobs 2 years ago. But I didn't say any of that, because I realized in that moment it wouldn't have mattered. She didn't want a conversation. She wanted a reaction. She wanted to keep twisting the knife. And I wasn't going to give her that. The rest of dinner blurred into a kind of nightmare haze. I remember pushing my food around. I remember laughing at things I didn't find funny. I remember Lisa brushing off my presence so completely, it was like I was a ghost haunting the edges of her social life. When dessert came out, I passed on it, said I was full. What I didn't say was that I felt sick. After coffee, The evening started winding down. Plates cleared. People drifted into the living room. I helped her mom carry a few dishes to the sink, out of habit more than anything. She thanked me, quietly, without looking me in the eyes. I wondered if she was embarrassed by Lisa, if she felt awkward, if she wanted to say something but didn't know how, or maybe she just didn't care. I excused myself and went to the bathroom, not because I needed to, but because I just needed 5 minutes alone. I closed the door and stared at myself in the mirror. My reflection looked unfamiliar, like a guy who had aged 10 years in the span of a single evening. And maybe I had, because whatever remained of the illusion that Lisa and I were okay, that illusion died at that dinner table. And the worst part? I didn't even know when things started to rot. I just knew they had. And now I had to figure out what the hell I was going to do next. We stayed longer than I wanted. That's the thing about family dinners. They rarely have a clean ending. There's always someone pouring one last glass of wine, a cousin still rambling about his job, a mom insisting you try just one more bite of pie. I played along, sat through the after-dinner chit-chat, made a few dry jokes, nodded when spoken to. But inside, I was somewhere else entirely. Lisa barely glanced in my direction the rest of the night. If anything, she seemed energized, like humiliating me had flipped some internal switch that made her suddenly warm and alive again. She laughed louder. She leaned into conversations. She looked radiant, free even. Meanwhile, I felt like a hollowed-out version of myself, just trying to hold it together long enough to get out the door. I was loading empty coffee cups into the dishwasher when I overheard her talking to Nicole and Jared on the other side of the kitchen island. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but they weren't whispering. Nicole asked, "So, are you really going to take that Chicago offer?" There was a pause, then Lisa's voice low, almost smug. "I don't know yet. I mean, it's tempting. A fresh start, right?" She laughed softly. "Maybe it's time." My hands froze over the dishwasher. A fresh start? She hadn't mentioned anything about an offer in Chicago. She'd said she was attending a conference. That was it. Now, she was talking about relocating? Alone? Jared chuckled. "You think Jason could handle that kind of distance?" Lisa gave a short laugh. "Jason can barely handle Atlanta." They all laughed. That was it. I don't even know how I finished the dishes. I think my body went on autopilot. I was somewhere between rage and disbelief, my hands moving while my mind reeled from the weight of her words. Jason can barely handle Atlanta. Like I was a child. An obstacle. Some burden she'd grown tired of carrying. The kicker? Nobody pushed back. Nobody said, "Hey, that's messed up." They just laughed along, as if I'd already become this abstract concept, something to be dismissed, made small, ridiculed when I wasn't looking. I stood up straight, wiped my hands on a towel, and stepped into the hallway. I needed a moment. I didn't want to make a scene. I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. Lisa noticed me pass through the living room and raised an eyebrow. "You good?" she asked from across the room, her tone overly casual. "Yeah," I said. "Just needed some air." She didn't follow. I stepped out onto the porch and let the cool night hit my face. It was quiet out there, the way only the suburbs get quiet, just the sound of crickets and the faint hum of highway traffic in the distance. I sat on the steps, my hands clasped tight between my knees, and stared out at the perfectly manicured lawn like it had answers for me. I felt numb, not in the can't feel anything kind of way, but the kind where everything feels dulled, muted, like you're watching a movie of your life, but someone turned the volume down. I thought about how we got here, about the years we spent building a life together, the late nights, the road trips, the inside jokes that no longer made her laugh. When had the shift started? Was it when I quit that corporate job to take a chance on myself? Was it when her career started rising and mine stalled out for a while? Had she outgrown me? Or just stopped trying? I didn't know, but I was starting to realize that it didn't really matter. 10 minutes passed before she finally stepped outside. I heard the door creak behind me and felt her presence before she said a word. "There you are," she said, her voice syrupy. "You disappeared. I told you I needed air." She sat beside me, but not close. Just enough to say she tried. "Sorry if I said too much tonight," she added, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "I had a little too much wine." I turned to her. "That's your excuse?" "Wine." She met my eyes. No guilt, Just that same breezy, passive look she gave when we fought about bills or dishes. Like the argument itself was inconvenient, not the subject of it. "You embarrass me in front of your entire family, Lisa," I said quietly. "You mock my job, my ambitions, the life we've built. Do you even realize how cruel that was?" She shrugged. "I was just joking. You're being sensitive." That word, sensitive, hit me like a slap. There it was, the final jab. Not just the words she'd said, but the way she dismissed them after. Like I was the problem. Like I couldn't take a joke. But they weren't jokes. They were carefully aimed little cuts. And she knew exactly what she was doing. I stood up slowly, brushing off my jeans. "I'm gonna go wait in the car." She looked up, slightly annoyed. "Are we leaving already?" "It's late," I said, "and I've had enough." She sighed, like I was ruining her fun. "You could have said something earlier if you were upset." I gave a small, bitter laugh. "Yeah, I could have, but I don't think it would have mattered." I turned and walked down the steps without waiting for a reply. Inside the car, the silence was deafening. The engine off, the keys in my lap, my phone screen dim. I stared out the windshield at the warm glow of the house I used to feel welcome in, and for the first time in a long time, I realized I didn't belong there anymore. Not just in that house, but with her. Lisa had stopped seeing me as a partner. I was a prop now, a placeholder, something she tolerated on the way to wherever she was going next. She was already halfway out the door. I just hadn't admitted it to myself until now.